So this review is for The Art of X2, and what's really interesting about this book is that even though all the Marvel movies always get an art book, the X-Men films rarely do. In fact, X2 and X-Men The Last Stand are actually the only X-Men movies that have an art book. It's always seemed kind of weird to me how the more recent X-Men films never seem to have any sort of art or making of books, so this is actually kind of a treat for fans of the X-Men movie universe, because it's really one of the only chances you get to see any sort of concept art for these movies. Now, this version that I'm reviewing here is the collector's edition, and the difference between that and the standard edition is that this book includes the full script for X2, and now usually I really hate when they include scripts in art or making of books, and especially if they try to, just include that in and, slap a collector's edition title on the front. That certainly wouldn't be worth it, but at least they also had the decency to include there's a gatefold towards the end that has sort of Nightcrawler artwork, and then also there's a section at the back. It's very small, about 8 pages, on some of the art from the first X-Men movie. So all of that taken into consideration, it is actually, quite a nice upgrade as a collector's edition. But in terms of whether the book as a whole is good, well, it's not the most impressive. The main thing it suffers from is just far too many screenshots from the film. The storyboards, are really great, especially for this really dynamic opening sequence with Nightcrawler. But so hopefully this, flip through will be really helpful in understanding whether this is worth your time and money, because I'm a huge fan of this film, but I don't necessarily think that this is a book I would need to purchase again. It really comes down to whether or not, you like what you see. I didn't think any of the art was particularly amazing. Although the one thing that I really do like about this book is they've included lots of captions and comments, which is nice because plenty of art books do not do that. And so as we go through, you will see there is quite a bit of text, but what the text that is there is really just primarily for labeling and describing the images. It's not really, there's very little in terms of insightful comments into the design or making of the movie. And when the text does include interviews of any sort, it really is just those sort of obvious and unnecessary comments that really are just sort of used to fill out the book. So, to have those, even if it is just, all it's doing is just labeling something, that's better than nothing. The number of screenshots and sort of what I would call kind of unimpressive artwork is actually a bit disappointing. I don't know, maybe it's more that just, personally, I'm not necessarily a fan of just these sort of artworks, so I think the artwork disappointed me for the same reason as the concept art for the Dark Knight trilogy did, in that I was kind of expecting it to be a lot more dynamic, visually impressive and interesting art, since they do come from a very visual medium, that of comic books, and then to look through this and the art, just judging it in terms of actual artwork, it's just not particularly great in my opinion. This book is published by Newmarket Press, who in the early to mid 2000s used to release tons of movie books, but they were almost always sort of just pictures from the film. They weren't really art and making of books, so the fact that this one actually gets as much art and making of as it does is actually interesting, because the type of books that Newmarket Press were publishing about movies at this time really were just sort of like almost just like picture book versions of the movies, where they take stills, put them in a book, and then try and charge fans. So you can see in this section of Mystique there's no concept art for her at all. That's just sort of screenshots and behind the scenes pictures. The imagery is just not dynamic enough or interesting enough. There are tons of kind of actually not even very good costume and character sketches. There is just nothing in terms of developments of looks and things, or how things progressed. It is kind of disappointing. If you are interested in the making of this movie, the DVDs and Blu-rays for both the first two X-Men films have really, really fantastic behind-the-scenes features. And that's the other thing I will say for this book, is that the one thing I often complain about is layout and design of the books, and this one actually is really nice. You will have noticed there's really not a lot of wasted space at all. In fact, there's hardly any white space. Everything is sort of like they cram a lot of images and text per page, except obviously when they're doing stuff like this. But otherwise, it's really good. You feel like you're getting your money's worth for each page, which is really nice. But on the whole, I am sort of on the fence about whether I personally like this book, whether I think it's, as a fan, I enjoy it. What the hell is SPX? Please don't tell me that's meant to say SFX. If anyone knows if SPX stands for something that I'm not aware of, definitely let me know. Perhaps it was just a term used for the X-Men movies. I don't know. Then you get the credits, and then this next section on Nightcrawler is exclusive to this collector's edition. The good/weird thing about this collector's edition is that it seems to have been much more widely released than the I guess a standard edition. That one seemed to have not get much of a release, so they're probably using the old trick of slapping collector's edition on something to get that money from you. And then this last section is also exclusive. It's the art of X-Men 1, and because there was no art book, this sort of stuff is really nice. But the problem is that I did and didn't kind of feel cheated by this section, because on the back cover they advertise this as being, an 8-page bonus section on the art of X-Men 1. But then you kind of feel cheated when, you get things like this that are just sort of screenshots. And what's interesting is, see, this here is probably my favorite piece of art in the book, because it really is the one that gives me the most is the one to me that most resembles sort of like a comic book panel in a way. It's sort of very colourful and dynamic, and I know that doesn't really work with what the vision of the film was meant to be, but it kind of does make me think that they should have put more of the artwork from X-Men 1 in here, because the stuff that I've just flipped through now is actually much better than X-Men 2 or The Last Stand. And see, this section, like, that's the only piece of concept art on this whole page. The rest is just screenshots, so it kind of feels a bit cheap on their behalf. Although what is really nice about the book is that it has really nice production qualities. It really does sort of feel like a collector's edition book. It has this really nice black faux leather cover. And also, if you find these reviews and flip-throughs helpful, please let me know by either subscribing or giving it a thumbs up, because that definitely helps out and lets me know that people are actually enjoying this.